welcome back. We just learned what a programming language is. It's just a set of instructions that we give to a translator. And this translator can be an interpreter or a compiler. And we give these files that we create, our own code, our source code, to these translators. And they allow us to give instructions to machines, to computers, to phones. So we learned that we need these machines in order for us to write Python, right? How can we get these? Well, we download them. And here we download Python from the Python Software Foundation from python.org. Now, before we download Python, we're gonna wait a little bit because in this course, I want you to understand why we're doing things, not just follow my tutorials, follow my videos, and, well, not understand the meaning and the fundamentals behind why we're doing things. You should be able to teach what you're going to learn. So let's take a pause here for a second. If this is the first time that you're learning a programming language, I have some good news for you. At the end of the day, all programming languages do the same thing. They tell the machine what to do. However, different languages have different ways of doing it. The beauty is that most languages have very similar principles. If this is your first programming language, well, this is going to be the hardest part, learning the first one. Afterwards, every new language you learn becomes easier and easier, in the sense that it's not the same as, let's say, learning English and Japanese, two very distinct languages. In programming, things become a lot easier as you learn that first foundational language. Now, if this is not your first language, and let's say you've written code in C, C++, or JavaScript, and you just want to learn Python, well, you're going to find these first couple of videos quite easy. But bear with me, trust me, we're going to get into some advanced topics here. And we're going to make you a full-fledged developer by the end of this. But let's go back to this topic at hand, this idea of downloading this translator. The thing is, when people refer to Python, the language, they're most likely talking about the implementation. That is, they're talking not about the language itself, because Python, the language, is just a specification. You can think of it as a document that somebody wrote that says, hey, when I write the words DEF, that means something in Python. And when I write something like print, that means something in Python. But the translation machines, well, we can have tons of them. Different interpreters, different compilers. For example, python.org, when you click download here, you're actually downloading this, the C Python, because it's written in the C programming language. This is what you're downloading. It's a program written in C to read your Python file and, well, run it on a machine. But there's other implementations. For example, there's the Jython project. And this is a translator that is written in the Java language. There's PyPy, which is actually written in Python. So it's a interpreter, it's a translation machine written in Python. And then there's also things like IronPython, which is written for the .NET framework. So here's a little trick question. When you download from Python, the official language is actually CPython. You're downloading this interpreter that follows the Python specification. But at the end of the day, it's a machine built by somebody. But these machines can, well, come in many forms. So when most people talk about Python, they're talking about this one, CPython, that, well, does our translation for us. It interprets our Python code and runs it on a machine. So we're downloading this. And if you want to really get into details as to what we're downloading, well, we're downloading a machine that takes our Python code, which, don't worry, we're going to write, and it goes through the interpreter, which we download using CPython. And this CPython is going to create something called a byte code. For example, this byte code prints hello world on our screen. Now, this might look like gibberish to you. And even for me, I don't know bytecode. This looks pretty, well, confusing just for printing hello world to the screen. Well, the interpreter does that automatically for us. We don't see it, it's behind the scene. Now, once it creates a bytecode that is closer to machine code, it then uses the CPython virtual machine. Again, just something that runs this code, and then this code gets run on our machine. Now, you're never ever going to be asked this question in an interview. I mean, maybe, and most developers don't know this. But I want you to use this as a reference, that when we write Python code throughout the rest of this course, this is what's happening. We're writing Python, it gets interpreted line by line and formed into what we call bytecode. This bytecode gets run on the CPython virtual machine, which runs on our computers, our phones, our laptops. And when we're downloading from python.org, we're downloading these two pieces so that once we have them downloaded, we can run Python. All right, that was a tough one. And I mean, we just got started. I hope your brain isn't exploding. Again, this is something for you to use as a reference. But you know what? I think it's time for us to learn how to actually run Python code. And don't worry, we are getting there. We are going to write our first Python program very soon. How can we finally run Python code? I want to start coding, right? Let's download this translation service, right? Well, I'm sorry. Actually, this is something we're going to do later on in the course. And I know what you're thinking. WTF, Andre? But what is this? Kindergarten? I mean, come on, I came here to learn Python. Start teaching me Python. And I know. And don't worry, in this course, we're going to get you to have a professional setup with Python so that when you go into the workforce, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. We're going to learn how to have all of these set up. First, we're going to have our terminal or command line where we can run Python from right in what we call a REPL. And then we're also going to use code editors like Sublime Text and Visual Studio Code. We're also going to use IDEs or integrated developer environments like PyCharm and Spyder. And we're also going to use Jupyter notebooks. And I'm going to show you how to set up all of these on your computer, what the pros and cons of using each are, and how some of them might be used for machine learning while others might be used for writing quick scripts. And I know this is a lot, but it's good to have these skills depending on what type of job you want. And if you're a professional Python developer, well, you should be using most of these. But there's a problem if I start introducing this in the course right away. You see, these tools, you have to install differently based on what computer you have. So if you're using a Mac, a Windows, a Linux, maybe you're using a mobile phone. Because we want to get started right away and write some code instead of worrying about installations and making sure that your computer is all set up, I want to make sure that all of us can get started right away, no matter what device you're on. Now, if you're really keen, head on over to the section where I show you how to install all these on all of your devices so that you have it set up and you can come back to this section. But I warn you, it's easy to run into problems and get confused when installing these tools. So I recommend sticking with what I'm about to show you, and I promise we will get you this professional setup. No other course is going to teach you all these things. But before I dive into these, we need to learn, well, we need to be able to just have fun and write some code. So what is this trick that I keep mentioning where we don't have to install any of these and still run Python? It's called REPL. You see, instead of us having to download this, we can go to repl.it. And when you go here, you'll get a login screen. Now, I recommend creating an account on here because trust me, it's going to be very, very useful. It's one of my favorite tools, and it allows you to save Python files just online. For example, once you log in and create an account, you can just create a new REPL, choose the language that you want to use. In our case, we want to choose Python. We can name our REPL. So we can just call it hey. We can just create a REPL and check it out. Right away, we have, without ever downloading this Python translation service, we can actually start writing Python right here in our browsers. And this is going to work for anybody that has an internet connection and a browser because this interpreter just runs automatically here. And the beauty with REPL is that, well, you can save these files, you can have different folders. So as we work through the course, you can actually have a folder for all your Python work and just have a really nice organized file structure that you can access anywhere you have internet connection. Now, if you don't want to sign up for REPL.it, it's completely free. You can also use this open source glot.io, which again, you go to Python and you're able to run Python online. So take your time, sign up for REPL.it, and let's get started with our first Python program. I'm finally getting there. In the next video, we're going to write our first piece of code. No more waiting. It's coding time. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.